Hello and welcome to another episode of The Business of Possibility, Ulster University Business School's popular podcast, now in its fourth series. I'm Wendy Austin and it's great to have you join us as we continue our exploration of the world of business, the key themes and the latest research with a host of dynamic leaders, industry experts and of course top academics. And let's face it, one of the key areas at the moment and for the future is artificial intelligence. Whether we are aware of it or not, AI is revolutionising how we work, how we live and how we interact. From using something like ChatGPT to get an essay written to Elon Musk transplanting a chip into a person's brain. We're not going there today. But where do we go next? How is it transforming industries? And is your business using it already? Should it be? What about the challenges and the opportunities that it presents? We've a great panel here with us today. Professor Sandra Moffat, Interim Pro-Vice-Chancellor and Executive Dean at Ulster University Business School. Dr. Samuel Moore, Lecturer in Computer Science at Ulster University School of Computing. Gareth Workman, Chief AI Officer at Kainos, which develops information technology for businesses and organisations, and Gareth Kelly, Data and Analytics Partner with EY Ireland. So, what is artificial intelligence? Let's start by defining it. In your view, Sam Moore, what is AI and how, just fairly briefly, has the role of AI evolved over years?
Yeah, certainly. It's quite a difficult question to start with, and I'm going to take the immediate cop-out and say that there isn't really an agreed definition of AI that we can all point to and say that, okay, this is the gold standard that we're happy to stand by. So I'll try and simplify it and take some of the mystery out of it and work through a little bit of where we were and how we got to where we are today. I would start by saying it's not new. It's not especially new. Certainly the models that underpin how AI works today, they've been around for a long time. Neural networks were proposed in the 40s. You can look to von Neumann and Turing and what they've done for computer architecture and trace all of those threads to arrive at where we are today. AI has been in and out of the news, I would say, across that span of time. One of the big moments, I think, in history for AI was, I think, in the late 90s, 97, when Deep Blue beat Kasparov in a game of chess, which was seen to be, chess at the time certainly was one of those pursuits that kind of represented human intellect. And okay, if we have a machine then that's trained on a corpus of data, and it can now defeat a human, what does that mean? Philosophically, what does it mean for technology and what does it mean for us moving forward? That was in the late 90s, and that's, yes, a significant development, but chess as a game has very strict rules and it has a set of principles and properties that you can learn. A child can learn chess just the same way as it's a simplification, but in the same way as a machine can learn chess. Fast forward to where we are today, we have AI operating in a different and perhaps more impressive way where we're able to work a lot more with unstructured systems. So the big development that's on everyone's minds, of course, is the ChatGPT, the kind of great advent of generative AI, where we have models that are capable of responding to various unstructured data, unstructured prompts that appear to interact with us in a way that's almost human. And that's been really interesting for us as a society and us as businesses and people and educators and students to grapple with. So briefly, what is it and how does it work? Well, I suppose the most famous cornerstone of AI is neural networks, I would still argue, and they're inspired by the way that the brain learns. So inspired by, and it's important to say inspired by and not directly modeled on, but you expose a model to some data, it trains over that data for a period of time. What does training mean? It means looking through the data, making a guess. If you get the guess right, you're positively reinforced. If you get it wrong, you're negatively reinforced. Quite similar to what we do with our children when we teach them and how their brains absorb information. So that's it in a really simple nutshell. What happens then if you expand that out to dealing with exabytes of data and training on enormously capable and high-powered computing platforms? That's how we arrive at the likes of the most recent, transformer models and attention models that have resulted in, for example, ChatGPT. So, in summary, no real mystery. The maths isn't some darkly shrouded corner of science. These are models that have been around for a while. We're just doing it at a much faster pace with much more power.
Well, thank you for that. I feel I know a bit more about it now. And you mentioned the whole business of how it's being used in businesses. Let's look at that. I mean, how Gareth Workman is AI impacting the businesses perhaps that you work with and some of the work that you're doing in Kainos itself?
Yeah, so as Sam pointed out, AI has been with us for some time, and it's always been that little bit out of reach, maybe a bit more niche. You've had the specialists come in and get the value from it. Generative AI has absolutely let the genie out of the bottle in terms of that. It's available in the same way as cloud burst onto the scene with the hyperscalers, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, where they were a credit card away. And it's the same with generative AI. People are able to now just go out and procure the service and then start to, as you say, get human-like interaction and knowledge from that kind of platform. So in terms of our customers, what we're seeing across our sectors and where we're working is a real demand to understand, well, how does AI give business competitive advantage? Many are saying it is the existential threat, and there's aspects that are entirely true. Other bits of what's the opportunity. So that's what we're seeing across our customers. That piece, how do they improve customer service? How do they, maybe ease of access to information to their employees, to their customers as well. What things can they automate and drive forward, as it were. So for us, what we're typically seeing businesses do is that sort of first step is, how do they make their workforce more productive? How do they help that workforce maybe not fear the technology, but actually how can this be a help? How can this be and it is that assistant as opposed to kind of replacing them. The other things we're seeing is that every organization almost encodes their DNA and their data. And what they're trying to do is, well, now we have this corpus of data. How do we make sense of what does it mean to be, the organization they are, and what value can that do? So we're seeing a lot of that. And the other piece that we're seeing is reshaping how they go about business. So, how are they, for example, if you have field engineers out there performing maintenance, how are you able to guide them better to make better decisions, to reduce injury or reduce outage or whatever. So again, it's that piece of, really trying to find where does this land? And like as Sam said, just kind of, it's been about for a long time, AI, and you say the definition isn't quite clear, but it's still not found its place in terms of kind of being normalized.
What about that, Gareth Kelly? Now, in EY, the people that you're working with, and I suppose in your own business too, I mean, some of them see it as a threat, some of them are using it to reshape their businesses. I mean, tell us maybe some of the stories there.
I think every client I have wants to know about AI. We're in a massive hype cycle at the moment, right? I think everyone's at the peak of inflated expectations. So that this is, I think, Gareth, you talked about it being a cross-sector opportunity. This is absolutely a cross-sector opportunity. I think in July last year, we ran a survey around 2,000 businesses, and 65% of the CEOs said, yeah, we believe in this opportunity. There's a huge, advantage of engaging with EY or with AI, whether that be through automation, make money, save money, or manage risk. But for me, there is a bit of a reality check happening in the market now, right? Any tech kind of cycle goes through the peak of inflated expectations through a trough of disillusionment, right? I think everyone's realizing that whilst ChatGPT makes AI readily accessible, when you want to engage with the business, you have to do it responsibly. And there are huge risks around GDPR, data, and also the ethical side of AI. I think if you think about, customers, right? You all use Amazon. Amazon's got the best recommendation engine in the world. Other businesses could use that information to encourage vulnerable people to spend too much money. In the gambling sector, for example, you could actually use AI to extract as much money as possible from users. And criminal gangs and fraud, risk, cyber attacks are all using AI as a powerful tool to get access to funds, to extort money from people and organizations. But that's almost the negative side, right? And I want to paint the picture around maybe what the opportunities are. So we talked about cross-sector opportunities, government and health, right? Something that's close to mind in Northern Ireland. I think AI brings government and public services closer to the citizen, a better citizen experience. I think in health, we're seeing it across care pathways, diagnostics, getting a better result for patients, which is really, really exciting. And then in the private and PLC sector, I think there's a huge opportunity to make money and save money. And maybe there's 3 projects that we're currently working on that are really worth calling out. So we're working with a software network provider. They are a customer-driven business. They have to get new leads. They have to interact and find customers. So we've used OpenAI housed behind their firewalls in a very safe environment to help them identify leads. So they look out at potential customers. It scans their websites, looks at their strategies. It looks at their annual reports. Are they profitable? It also looks at internal sales data. What have they bought previously? And this acts as a sales agent or support, a co-pilot, as we call it. And that's helping them identify 50 million plus worth of additional opportunities. So that's one real example of actually we're helping companies make money. I think being more responsible, not just making money, we're also working with utilities, keeping the lights on here across the island of Ireland. There's a lot of products and assets across networks that can go bang and go wrong. So predicting when that's going to happen is a massive thing, and also having the right resources to the right places. That's a problem. It's a maths problem. There is something's going to go wrong. We need people to get there in a certain amount of time. How do you optimize that? So AI is really optimizing problems for businesses and waging a war on that type of admin and difficult decision making. Then lastly, probably when you think of EY, you probably think of assurance and our kind of audit business. So fraud and risk is a huge aspect of that. So AI can scan transactions from general ledgers and sub-ledgers and rapidly identify fraud and almost stop sampling and look at total populations. So you're getting a better layer of assurance and better control. So yes, 65% of CEOs believe in the opportunity. There is an opportunity. 65% also are a little bit worried about the power of AI and the ethical and social and potential fraud and risk opportunities there.
It's fascinating, I must say. And listening to the 3 of you explaining all of that, and then Sandra, from your point of view, and others here in Ulster University, you're having to kind of teach this on the hoof, so to speak, I suppose. This is moving at pace. How do you stay on the curve and you stay ahead of it in a way that it's possible then to teach it?
So I suppose, Wendy, when it first came on the education radar, we went into preventative mode. It was very much, how can we lock this down? How can we stop students from using this? How can we I suppose, prevent students from incorporating this into their assessment pieces, for instance? Very quickly, we realised that not only was that a naive approach, but it was also a very unfruitful one. So very much the challenge for us is to teach our students how to use the tools correctly. I often think back to whenever I was a child, and it was of the era where you got the leather-bound encyclopedias. Did that make me any smarter? Potentially. But only if I was able to use it appropriately. And it's the same for any of these generative AI tools. If a student is taught how to use it properly, and that normally takes in the skills that we want our students to have: the critical assessment, the judgment, the positioning of the content within their own subject area or within the relevancy of their assessment. So being able to utilize these tools, but to take that critical thinking and that richness back and apply that within their context of assessment is really where we want to be with AI. There's absolutely no point in trying to ignore it in this digital era that we're in, where we have data, information, knowledge underpinning absolutely everything that we do. We need to make sure that our students are fully aware of digital enhancements, including these generative AI tools. So our challenge is to encourage the use of this. And we have done that really well within the Ulster University Business School in terms of, for example, setting an assignment which gives the student the answer in AI. So we generate the ideal answer, and then you're asking the student to unpick that. So to analyze that, why is that the case? Why is AI tools telling us that this information exists? Look at the relevance, say, of this within application and business. Look at the references. Are they correct? How do you know they're correct? So it's encouraging them to actually judge the content and to be able to apply that content within their own context. And that's the challenge for us. I think as a business school, our remit is to teach the fundamentals of business, and that's your subject expert, whether you're an accountant, an economist, a marketer, or an analyst, but also to be able to be digital savvy. That's what industry wants at the moment. Students who can apply those subject skills, but also to have the good, we used to talk about soft skills, communication, critical thinking, design thinking, critical analysis, and so on. Those are becoming the hard skills. Those are what, to teach sort of how to use the software is easy per se, to show them how to navigate a content management system is not that difficult, but to be able to apply that in a relevant way is really what industry wants, and that's where we have to pitch ourselves as a university.
And what about the ethics? I think everyone has mentioned it at some point up to now, but obviously you would have been teaching before all of this business ethics, and businesses work in a certain way, but the ethics of AI are really quite concerning, aren't they? When you hear the kind of godfathers of AI talking about how worried they are about how it might be used, and Bill Gates saying, well, it's fine as long as the good AI guys, of which of course he doubtless regards himself as being one, as long as they have it, but the bad guys don't get to be kind of on top, if you like. That's a bit different to maybe the ethics that you might have been dealing with previously, is it?
I think it's back to what Gareth was saying around, sort of there will always be that dark web as such. There's always going to be scope for criminality and for misuse and mistrust if people want to use it in that way. Again, the education piece is making sure that students are aware that there is that negative aspect, but to, encourage the many, many positive and beneficial aspects of these Gen AI tools. It was mentioned, sort of the rapidness that we can process data and information now. That can only serve us well to make better decisions for our business, to be able to look at how we strategize based on the information that we have in hand. It's not guesswork anymore. We can really model and predict the future based on the trends and historic data that we have. So it's making sure that we utilize all of that in a positive way. My background is computer science, so we used to teach our students how to do ethical hacking, for instance. And again, it's raising awareness of that. You can prevent things from happening when you know what the potential risks are. So for us as a business school, it's making sure that our students fully understand the negativity with some of these applications, but also the positivity and how they can use that to future-proof and to aid the businesses that they're going into work in.
Sam, maybe you'd like to pick up on that?
Yeah, certainly. It's really interesting to hear how the business school are approaching this, because I would say it mirrors a lot what we're seeing and doing in the School of Computing. Incidentally, on this topic of reliability, ethics, what's right and wrong and good and bad with AI, that's a lot of kind of the background of my research. My PhD was very much in the area of reliability, and I looked at AI and IoT and what happens when these things go wrong. And so where we are today, just this semester, we've started a new module. We've begun teaching a new final year module in the School of Computing called Social, Sustainable and Ethical Computing. And this is a really positive move forward for us, I think, in our new program, because I totally agree about the hard and soft skill line that you described there. And this is one of the things that AI has changed greatly over the last year or two, is that it's really easy now to learn how to write a program, or to learn how to operate a content management system, or whatever it happens to be. That's quite easy to teach in some ways. What we really should be striving to send students away with when they get their degree are critical thinking skills, the ability to evaluate systems and their potential impacts. So a lot of what we're looking at in this module is, okay, well, what can go wrong? What happens when that goes wrong? And what are the consequences? And can you balance the potential risks with those consequences and differentiate between what you can do and what you should do? Because those things may often be different. And I was really interested and pleased to hear some of what you mentioned there, Gareth Kelly, that's happening in your sector. And again, my own personal experience is mirroring that, because you talked about working in assurance and the level of risk that exists around that. In the school, we're working with PwC at the moment and looking at a lot of their kind of risk-sensitive projects. And while we've discussed generative AI, I agree that there's a reality check there, that oftentimes it's simply necessary to have a human in the middle of the process as the pilot. Okay, AI can be the co-pilot, that's fine. But what happens when you need to explain that decision, when you need to dissect it? How do you get to the bottom of these black box models? So our experience very much mirrors what you have described.
Yeah, I always talk about the mind and the machine. I think AI is fantastic at processing huge amounts of data, but you still need that mind in the machine. And I think, we've talked about criminality and fraud. It's almost put that aside. That's always going to happen, right? And I think AI might police AI effectively someday. But for me, I think there's a real risk of getting things wrong here that people really, underappreciate. I think AI has hallucinations. I think I've been talking to clients the last 15 years around data quality, right? And it's a real hard sell. No one thinks data quality is sexy, but now I always say actually data quality is sexy now, because it allows you to train a model and make better decisions. So there is a real issue with hallucination of AI. So having that mind in the machine almost is that quality assurance piece. There's a really good story of a few lawyers in America who were looking for some precedent around a case, and they used ChatGPT to do that, and it was read from a fictional novel, so that the precedent didn't exist. They landed this in court, and obviously we're in trouble because of that. So yeah, I agree with you, Sam. There's a bit of mind in the machine here, and the curation, like your essays that you'll see and all of your, the submissions in the university. I think it needs that bit of personality and that bit of human element. It's a bit of magic in the AI.
That was one of Trump's cases, wasn't it? I think it was Michael Cohen, wasn't it?
I think it was, yeah.
There was a lot of grovelling had to go on subsequently. Just to the other, Gareth, I mean, in Kainos, you've got quite a cohort of apprentices coming through as well, and it's terrific for them to be in there, getting their hands on the tools and learning about the whole business, and it's, I suppose, so much more immediate and easy to get hold of now, but they have a lot of learning to do in this area then, haven't they?
Absolutely, but it's really interesting. Sam and I, you touched on this earlier, just before we started talking this morning, is that it's like whenever you watch children growing up, they ask weird and wonderful questions that almost over time, so the next generation of graduates coming through have a different outlook in life, have a different perspective. I think they actually will end up being the driving force, as to back to kind of the point earlier. It's like there's always going to be kind of the nefarious, the bad out there, but there's lots of good. And I think, harnessing that talent and that intellect coming through to how could we use this technology to fundamentally do better things. So for me, yes, there's a lot to learn, but equally, we talked earlier, how even, train or learning has changed. Actually, some of the things that people are going to learn going forwards now is going to be much different. It's, they might not need to know the inner workings to the finest detail of the black box they talked about, but actually it's how do you get the best outcome, and how can you be confident, like you say, that it's, not hallucinating, that it's not. So I think there's a really good opportunity to, create unimaginable experiences, just like we have with technology's moved on. So I'm excited by it, to be honest.
And I thought it was an interesting analogy that you used, Sandra, when you talked about encyclopedias, and it kind of made me think about the stuff that I learned at school and how much of it I have actually used since. Not a lot, actually, I think is maybe the answer to that. So maybe there was lots of stuff that we learned before that didn't really matter that much. And, the fact that you have something like this, which maybe takes a lot of the boring stuff away and lets you concentrate on the things that really do matter. Is that me being a bit naive? Probably is. But
I think there'll always be the fundamentals that all of our students need to be aware of. I mean, you wouldn't be a very good accountant if you couldn't count, you know. So, so we do have to embrace that sort of subject expertise, but enhance it with digital transformation. So it's really looking at how we push the envelope in terms of this. So, you know, most of our employers come to us asking for students who are confident, resilient, customer facing, motivated, that sort of secret sauce in a way, you know, and trying to sort of instill that into our graduates to move forward. This is not where we see our students as 4 years and you're out the door with your degree at the other side. Thank you very much for your custom. We are in the business of lifelong learning. So there's always that opportunity to reskill and upskill for our businesses. You know, we are Northern Ireland PLC. So it's very important to us that we are contributing the skills, not that industry needs now, but that they will need in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, and so on. So as you said at the beginning, this is very fast paced, and the challenge for us is to stay fully aware and abreast of the changes as they emerge. We often talk about ChatGPT, but as colleagues will know, that's just one version. It's maybe the one that's mostly well known, but you know, there's lots and lots of generative AI tools there. Now we can't obviously utilize all of those, but what you can teach is those transferable skills where students can, you know, have the basics and then utilize their knowledge and understanding to enhance the application process. For us, within Ulster University, you know, it's very much around that practical implementation. So just having book knowledge doesn't get you very far in the outside world. It's really understanding how to utilize that, how to implement and embed that, how to change the culture of your organization to embrace the digital era, and how to move all of us forward. Very much the analogy of a rising tide raises all boats. That's where we want to be in the Northern Ireland context.
Does it make, Gareth Workman, does it make it easier for a company, if it really embraces this, to reinforce its culture and to get it through to its workforce?
So I think there's a really interesting aspect of this, in that obviously we now live in a much more hybrid world. When people are joining an organization, it used to be you were Monday to Friday in the office, and by pure osmosis, you learnt information by simple proximity to people. Actually, if you're able to encode that into a tool, into the technology, you actually have a way of people engaging with that and starting to learn about an organization that it's quite hard to do when you're in a distant, remote way. So I think the answer for me is that I think it actually will help capture the culture, and equally as it develops, we'll be able to tell that story better, and those people joining the organization will be able to I wouldn't say maybe click easier. They'll be able to ask questions, be able to go, rather than having to try and find every single piece of information, they actually go off and query and get context back. So I think it will actually help, but it's back to the point we talked about. How do we make sure that, back to your point, Gareth, earlier about the quality of information that comes back? It's kind of the old analogy, garbage in, garbage out. So it's that piece of actually, you need to make sure your data is a really curated state, that you get confidence of what's coming back, and that's about telling your culture, which people hold dear. You need to be clear that it's on the money.
I wonder, that business of capturing the culture, that's a very interesting way of putting it. And I wonder, is there a great kind of coincidence of timing, if you like, here in a way, Gareth, in that the other Gareth, in that people aren't in the office learning things by osmosis anymore. There's still lots of people working from home. Still people I know who work from home entirely now, who normally would not have done so. So maybe this is just something that has hit at exactly the right moment.
So I think there's a couple of things there, right? So I do think people are suffering because of this hybrid model, right? And I always think people learn by proximity to brilliance, right? So there's two types that you have. The AI kind of, will create some brilliance for you if you ask us the right question, but you really have to ask us the right question. But that's where the power of universities and actually getting into the office and working with big organizations comes in. So you actually teach people how to take some of that brilliance and articulate it. And I love the idea of NI PLC, right? I think it cuts through politics, it cuts through religion, it cuts through all the issues that sometimes we have in NI. So creating that culture of brilliance to grow NI, to grow a kind of an economy around technology, data and AI, to me is a really exciting proposition. And I think there's a huge opportunity around that. So we're in a culture war at the moment, right? We're almost losing the personal touch. So I think we need to bring the mind back into the machine and the personality back into their business. So I do think there's a balance here. So that would be my thoughts around that.
I just wanted to ask you something to go back to something you said earlier about the 65% of CEOs being really keen on using AI in their business. What about their staff? I mean, because one of the things that I suppose has emerged, well, it was one of the things that came out originally about AI. So many jobs are going to go. 20 years time. I can't remember all the figures because they all kept changing. But, if you're one of the worker bees and you're looking at this and thinking, well, this is going to do away with all the boring stuff, but actually I'm doing the boring stuff. So are ordinary people in the workforce as keen on the idea of AI as their bosses who can see a profit opportunity are?
I would say that the more on the ground coal-faced workforce are actually leading the way here, right? I think when you think about some of the CEOs, right, they're almost buying into the hype and by default saying there has to be something in AI. I think it's going to be the younger generation that's going to make this happen, right? So there's a huge opportunity here. AI is definitely waging a war on admin, right? So all the boring stuff that you can do. I think Excel, I love Excel, right? And I grew up in Excel, but the Excel modeling, the Power BI, the visualization, it's just going to become part of software. I think it's going to ask people to be more brilliant. I think the best data scientists will survive. But the people who make the most impact might actually not even be data scientists. They might just know how to use the AI tools. So it's like drawing down widgets and apps. There's brilliance in actually understanding how to use AI in the right way. So I actually think this is an opportunity, and you're going to see a shift in the capability map. Maybe the traditional data science. One of my more kind of maybe different thoughts is that the data scientist is dead, right? And that actually it could become more democratized. So it's a bit controversial. I'm looking at Sam here.
I just had a little look around there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, is data science as a practice dead? I don't know. I think it's interesting about it's interesting what you say about AI and is this coming for my job or is it not? I think that's a really good thing to look at. And I think perhaps one of the reasons why this is a little bit scary for people is because we've been through these great overhauls, industrializations before. If you look at the introduction of the industrial age, okay, well, whose jobs did that threaten? People working with their hands, working with machinery. I recall my mum being laid off 2 or 3 times because she was a print finisher, operating a print machine, feeding in the paper, binding the books, and so machines just do that. And eventually she had to leave that industry and trade because it just overall was redundant. And AI is interesting because while we're used to that type of automation, it appears to be the case that now AI is coming for the knowledge workers. And that's a bit of a scary thing because for years we've sent people to university for degrees in all types of management and interactions with businesses and in whatever industry or substrata that happens to be. So what do we do with that? I totally agree that I don't really think I don't think we need to be as afraid, perhaps as some of the reports would suggest. However, I think we need to proceed with cautious optimism. I think I agree with you in some ways that on your comment on data science. I've been kind of mulling that around my head. I'm not sure how exactly to classify what a data scientist is, but I think more and more you're right that these tools and techniques, as more systems are developed, just like what happened with cloud, and you said this right at the very start, Gareth, that will come down the tree. And so with that coming down the tree, then people gain access to it, it is more democratized. So what does that do for the researchers, for the data scientists? Well, I think then the research moves more into the space of perhaps it's optimization, perhaps it's analyzing the future of these technologies and how they interact with society, as well as discovering new and nascent technologies. So yeah, perhaps it's not such a controversial call as you suggest.
Gareth, the other Gareth, you were looking a bit concerned there for a moment too.
No, I think it's to kind of point. I think it is going to democratize, and I think that's what these tools are doing. It is they are bringing capability that were perhaps for kind of the profession that you built a discipline around, is actually they're bringing that to the keyboard. But it's that piece of, how do you get the kind of the right kind of response out, or the right outcome? I think that's the bit that, there is a piece there whereby back to how do we make sure that actually as these things develop, because the version of AI we use today, no matter what flavor you give it, is the least capable that we will ever have. So the more advanced it gets and the more capable, how do you distinguish good from bad? And it's back to kind of that ethics piece. It's, where is that boundary? So I think it's the pace of kind of direction of travel, but also making sure that there's enough guide rails and enough in there that actually we can be confident that, it's adding value and it's not actually taken away. Because sometimes we look back and you see this even now, is that we look back on professions and think, I wish that had survived. It's a craft or something, and machines have replaced it. Whether it's, if you look at kind of like, you see people like crocheting and doing these are dying skills because there's no need for them to do them kind of generally day to day as a profession. So there's a bit of, will there be things we regret letting slip through your hands, as it were? So I think that's going to be an interesting one.
And Gareth Kelly was saying, Sandra, that it's the young people who are coming through now. Well, we've always said this, haven't we? It's the next generation will do this, but that they're going to be kind of the driving force to make this work properly. I hope I'm paraphrasing you correctly.
Yeah, no,
there,
that's fair. Yeah.
And they're to a large extent in your hands, really, aren't they?
Yeah, I think we make more of this than actually what the young folk do. They're used to having 3 or 4 devices on the go at any one time to be, sort of extracting information continuously without, considering their actions from it. So this is nearly an embedded skill with our young people coming forward. I think the challenge for us is harnessing that for the potential of our businesses going forward. And to do that, the call is very much to co-create the curriculum, to encourage industry to come in and work with us. They obviously have the subject knowledge and the expertise from their own businesses. We can provide the fundamentals of what the students need to know. But when that merges together, you've got a very powerful resource there where the student is able to analyze sort of the content from some of these AI tools, but to put it within the context of industry, to understand why you would do something in that particular way, why you would socialize, with people within your businesses to sort of make that better. My sort of research area is business analytics. So for many, many years, I've been doing consultancy with organizations. And one of the first questions we nearly ask is, well, why are you capturing that data? And often companies can't answer that because it is, well, we just do. It's there. It's available. We'll take it. That provides the challenge then to interpret from your data. So how do you convert that into information? How do you understand what you're doing? This is all about efficiency saving for companies. So again, nothing new there, right back to organizational behavior theories and lean manufacturing and so on. This is something that we've had in practice for many, many years. What we're doing now is looking at it through a different lens. So if you think of a kaleidoscope where you shift the dial slightly and you get a different picture and so on, this is what we're doing with these AI tools now. So for us, that co-creation piece is key to future-proof our young people coming forward. But I don't think the challenge is there. I'm thinking back to whenever I started in the university. I'm not going to give my age away, but we had, a server room on campus that you nearly needed to be, dressed to enter in case the dust or the pollen or so on sort of, changed our server. Cloud changed that, where we don't even think now about storage of data. Where do we put our data? It's just there. It's a given. AI tools are going to be the exact same. They'll just become part of our routine, and the skill of our young people will be how to utilise and apply those appropriately.
Well, as Gareth Workman was saying, Sam, this is all on a kind of upward trajectory. I mean, where we are now is the slowest that it's going to be, if you like. It's just going to get better and better. So what's happening in the research space? I mean, what are the emerging areas in AI that we should be aware of, particularly from a business point of view, and perhaps how might they shape the future of industry?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think, going back actually to what this Gareth had mentioned at the start about heightened expectations and the real possibility, perhaps likelihood that we will enter into a trough of disillusionment here, I think that's absolutely correct. Nonetheless, I think overall, it's hard to deny the long-lasting impact, the outsized impact that this will have on industry. So in terms of research, what's happening? Well, the first thing I would say is it's really quite difficult to compete with the size and scale of the big AI players. And that's true for us as researchers, that's true for many businesses around the world, and that's true for many societies around the world. We don't necessarily have that level of firepower. Fortunately for us, I don't think that's necessary. And I think, oddly enough, the future of AI doesn't lie. I mean, who am I to say, really? But my opinion is that the future of AI doesn't lie with these general purpose models. I think we'll continue to discover holes and faults in those systems whereby we can't audit, we can't account for, and we can't explain the decisions that they make. And I think that that's a quagmire that we will continue to be bogged down in for so long as we pursue those types of systems. At the end of the day, if you're working with a client who you're auditing and you're undergoing a process of confirming their identity and verifying who they are, it's never an acceptable excuse to your perhaps a party that's auditing your business to say, well, an AI model confirmed that for us. You have to explain and account your decisions. And I don't necessarily see, because it isn't innate in their architectures, it being a possibility that these types of broad, big, general purpose models really solving those types of problems. And that's a good thing for us because it allows us to really push some research into specific, smaller, task-oriented machine learning and AI models that can be integrated more fully into an organization's pipeline. That's a lot of the type of research we do here at the School of Computing. So, okay, you have a specific task like identifying and verifying a customer. What can we do with AI? Well, we're not going to throw ChatGPT at it because we can't rely on its outcome. So let's build a model that kind of centers around the human, where you have this kind of human in the loop paradigm that allows the human to control the AI that's working, to fully explain its decisions so that you can have an accountable system. I think that plays into all of these conversations around ethics and responsibility that I think are absolutely key to the future of AI. What's going to happen if we let this run unmanaged? People will continue to lose trust in it. It's in my opinion difficult to trust at the moment. Certainly when you can't explain what it's doing and it's not infinitely powerful. So if we don't begin to manage those expectations and build those kinds of systems, both in research and industry, people will lose trust and it'll run the risk of not reaching its full potential.
I see Gareth Kanos, if I can call you that, as opposed to Gareth EY, is nodding furiously there. Yeah. So the bespoke model is the answer rather than the off-the-shelf one.
So the piece that also I think stands to reason here is that, if you look at, I'll give you an analogy. So when we all, many years ago, used to have your disposable camera or your camera roll, you could take 30 pictures and you thought really hard about what you're going to do with your 30 photographs. We now have mobile devices, and I'm pretty sure everyone around this table probably hasn't deleted anything and takes more pictures than you ever need. And it's almost like the generative, those massive models, they're hugely capable, but actually if you look at the impact on the planet, the amount of processing power to use sort of that, I think we've talked about before, that sledgehammer to kind of crack a nut. So for me, it's that piece of actually, how do we start to balance the good use of it with, and I'll say it's a secondary concern to ethics, responsibility, explain a little bit the sustainable aspect of it. Do smaller, better trained models for a purpose, actually give you the best outcome possible, but also in that kind of pursuit of actually stopping the global warming on our planet. So I think I'm with you in this. I think actually through some of that sort of hype cycle, actually we'll come out the other side and find the general models are good for general purpose things, but actually if you have a very kind of specific niche ask or desire, therefore then it's probably the smaller models.
Yeah, which I think that tends to be the makeup of most problems in business. It's rarely the case that we can just throw a generalized solution at something. If that were the case, then the landscape of IT and business would have already been very different by now. So I think it requires a good deal of thinking and designing.
I think the only other thing I would add is that with the generalized piece, if everyone around the room here asks the same question of the generalized model, they will get pretty much the same answer back. So where's the advantage? So that's the piece I think is the smaller pieces allow you to tune for competitive advantage, as it were, as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just to maybe challenge a couple of bits of that, right? So I think I was listening to a TED talk over the weekend, right? And one of the premises was about 150 years ago, right? Academics who could read and write, and maybe the high priest or high priestess believed that actually maybe only some of the population need to be able to read and write. And then they very quickly realized that actually you get much more benefit for society if everybody starts to learn this, right? So I think at the minute you've got the likes of Google, Amazon, Meta, the big players, Microsoft, almost having this high priest or high priestess view of access to the congregation and all of the data, right? And this is where these models are coming from. So there is a risk that democratization doesn't happen fast enough. So I love what you guys are talking about, saying actually these models that are built for a specific purpose are a way of democratizing that. I think though, you'll pull down those algorithms and they'll start to be available, whether it's an optimization, a clustering, a decision support type tool. I think data and the control of data is what's going to actually shift it to be democratized. Because we talked earlier around rubbish in, rubbish out. So this TED Talk then talked about an analogy. Imagine you brought all of the pizza shops in America together and they shared all of their sales data. So you have an AI startup that's collecting and kind of bringing all this data together. You could run then an algorithm which would optimize a pizza store. So you could set one up everywhere to kind of say, this is what to sell when, this is what to post on social media, who to sell to. So actually, I think there's three strands here. There is the big players who will continue to kind of evolve these major models. There's the niche piece around saying, actually, we'll develop our models with the really good data scientists. And then the third one is actually the data players are going to come in and start to aggregate data. And there's going to be huge value there. And kind of the question is the value in the model or in the data? I don't know.
I would actually take that a stage further to say the value is in the application. So it's okay even having your data to that sophisticated level. But, in the spirit of entrepreneurship, unless you have a good idea of what to do with that data and you're able to implement that idea, it's irrelevant how much data or how sophisticated that data is if you can't use it.
And what about businesses who aren't doing any of this at the moment, Sandra, who are maybe taking that, I'm just going to stay out of this for a moment and see how it goes and pick and choose the time that I get involved or the way in which I get involved. What sort of advice would you give to them at the moment?
I would be very surprised to find a business that wasn't looking at this at the moment. I think every business understands that data is the driver for decision making for the future. So even if you're not looking at the generative AI models per se and utilizing those functionalities, everyone has a web presence now. Everyone does that sort of keyword searches and, pulls back that information from a wider source. Google is nearly everyone's best friend. If you have a question at all from your children, it's like, oh, go Google it. So we have that as part of our DNA now. So I don't think there is any business that's not using this. I think still for our companies though, it's socialization is key. And we talked earlier around that hybrid model and so on. Within the university, we talk about campus stickiness, and you'll have saw it's Monday morning, 9 a.m. The campus is buzzing. That is the same throughout our 3 campuses. So I think now that while people have the tools, they still want to have that human connection. We are social creatures. And I think that's where the key is in utilizing these. It's to have the data data, but to be able to, come together to discuss the modeling from that data and to be able to put in the ideas that will take our businesses forward. So I would be very surprised if no one was looking at this.
Just a quick one from each of you to maybe wrap up for us today. What about that relationship between AI and business in the next 5 years? Gareth, Kelly, how do you see that evolving?
So I actually think democratization is going to happen, right? I think there's a real opportunity. So going to be really positive. I think startups have a real opportunity to bring together their ambition, their ideas, and almost create a conglomerate of sharing data. So industry sector, we talked about the pizza shops, right? I think there's a real opportunity for startups to get together, share data, design their businesses with an AI power at the center. So I think there's a real opportunity there. I think we need to take control away from the giants, right? And we need to kind of invest and be really innovative. So I love that, the courses that are happening at University of Ulster are going to start to create that generation of entrepreneurs focused around AI. One thing I do think is going to happen, I think the death of the high street is almost happening. I was walking down here today and you could see the amount of shutters. I think stores will have landmark stores where there's centres of population, and I think it's going to be hyper-personalisation, online experiences then around that. And then a positive, which I do think will come from that, is the rise of the artisan. I think the local businesses, the quality, farm to fork type stuff, the crocheting you talked about earlier, I think a lot of that quality and local experience hopefully will rise up out of this. So AI has a place, but also I think the human element has a place, and arts and bringing that personality back to business has still got a big place in society.
The other, Gareth?
Yeah, so I think for me, if I was to predict where it was to go, I think it's going to be, I'll be wildly wrong, but it's that piece to me. It's if the Innovator's Dilemma, Clayton Christensen. It's that piece of AI does bring that radical, disruptive innovation. So for me, it's that piece of over the next few years, I think we will set new norms, just like you described, this hyper-personalized online experience. Actually, I don't think we know how far we can push this. And back to on kind of something you mentioned earlier, Sam, was just because we can doesn't mean we should. So I think that's the piece. It's that piece of balance between capability with what's the right kind of outcome.
Sam?
Yeah, in the next 5 years, of course, it's hard to say. I think one of the big challenges that we have to overcome in the next 5 years for this to work is the kind of lagging behind where the progress has been made with the models and the approaches versus our understanding of it and our ability to work with it. We still approach this with a relatively prehistoric brain, and we're dealing with things that from an observer level appear to be mystical, and we need to fix that. We need to demystify this quickly, because only through doing that will people truly understand the possibilities and at the same time the limitations. If we don't get that right, we run the risk of these things being misused in a wide fashion. I agree also with what Gareth's saying about the ability to specialize these things. I think that's key for businesses. Otherwise, we continue to run the likelihood of ending up with great inequalities in how this stuff works, who has access to it, and what can be done with it. I think that's a bad thing for society. So let's push for that. And I think a key thing to achieve that is kind of integration of academia and businesses at a more local level. So let's push for that and see where we get.
Sounds like your cup of tea there, Sandra.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think for us as a university, our challenge is really to encourage that critical thinking and appreciation of what is available in terms of data and information. Innovation will be key. Entrepreneurial spirit will always be key. So it's making sure that we are equipping our students now for what the future may or may not hold for them. It's making sure that they have the ability and the confidence to take on some of these challenges and to know when they are onto the right thing and to really harness the positivity that all of these AI tools can bring.
Look, it's been completely fascinating. Thanks all of you so much. That's about it from us for today. But many thanks to both Gareth Workman and Gareth Kelly, to Dr. Sam Moore and Professor Sandra Moffat as well. Thanks for listening to this Business of Possibility podcast. You can listen to our previous episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Please do subscribe and rate us. And of course, tell all your friends. Thanks.